Hello everybody and welcome to the painting tutorial where we'll be painting Ornstein and Smough from the Dark Souls board game. The first step is to prime your model black, and then we're going to be painting the armor and the weapons. We're using weapon bronze from the Army Painter. You can be pretty messy with this step. You just need to get it all over all the armor for both models and their weapons. Once you've got that base coat applied, the next step is to add some gunmetal from the Army Painter. Now the Smough model doesn't need it. You need to go to your Ornstein model and use this color to paint in the chainmail and the blade of his spear and any other metal bits that you find. The next step is to use Mephiston Red by Citadel to paint the hair on the Ornstein model. The next step is to apply a wash. We'll be using Strong Tone from the Army Painter. We're going to be applying this over both weapons. That includes the hammer on the Smough model and the Dragon Slayer spear on the Ornstein model. You're also going to apply this over all of the armor, the weapon bronze colored armor, as well as any silver details. Also, don't forget to apply the Strong Tone over the red hair. Once the wash has dried completely, we're going to move on to dry brushing. I'll show you how I dry brush the Ornstein model first because it's a little different than how we do the Smough model. So first you're going to dry brush weapon bronze pretty liberally over the entire model, over all the armor, avoiding the silver bits. Next step is to apply a zenithal dry brush using Greedy Gold from the Army Painter. You'll be applying this in all the areas that you want to be brightest or that are going to be facing directly up into whatever your light source is. You're going to want to cover maybe 40 to 50% of the model in this and not hit anything underneath the model. So any like under the armor, under the arm, stuff like that. You want to apply this as if you're looking directly down on top. That's where your light source is going to be, and this will really help the model brighten up from the top down and give it a nice sense of depth. Moving on to the Smough model, you can see the shade has completely dried, and we're going to apply a dry brush of weapon bronze. We're going to apply this in two steps. The first step is to apply a heavy dry brush of weapon bronze onto his hammer. The entire thing, really cover it. The second step is to apply a zenithal dry brush over his armor. Be pretty sparing with this as we want this model to look distinctly darker than the Ornstein model. So you're going to want to go from the top down, really anything that you can see from the top down, and just sort of lightly dry brush over the top so it just kind of picks out the edges. Little goes a long way with this step. And with that, we're done for now with the Smough model. Put that aside. The next step is to use plate mail metal from the Army Painter to do some sort of layering and edge highlighting on our Ornstein model. So what you're going to want to do is do a layer onto the chainmail parts of his armor and do an edge highlight on the blade. next step is to use shining silver from the Army painter to apply an edge highlight to only the blade. We're going to move on to the hair, and in order to make this look more realistic, we're going to want to layer it up in a kind of a specific way. I learned this from watching YouTube videos, specifically Squidmar Miniatures tutorial on how to do hair. So check that out if you get a chance. But basically what you're going to want to do is use Mephiston Red to start and do some streaking down motions, like draw some lines going over any of the sort of bobbled out areas. So that's going to be the top curve of the hair, that second curve, the big swoop down at the bottom of the miniature and towards the tip of the hair, and sort of run it back in straight line motions. Don't cover the whole thing. We don't want to layer up the entire piece of hair. We want to sort of put this on the areas where the sun or where your light source would be hitting it. And it's okay if it's not totally perfect. Like, it doesn't need to be 100% perfect. That's what's going to make it look a little more natural and realistic. Next, using a lighter shade of red, I'll be using pure red from the Army painter. Do the same thing in just a smaller part of the layer that you previously did. So whereas that first layer covered maybe like 50% of the miniature in those lines, you're going to be doing maybe 30 to 40% within that layer. And again, do straight lines just in the areas where the highlights would be hitting it, where the light source would be hitting the miniature naturally. You may want to do this in a couple of thin coats, and it's okay if it's not perfectly straight lines or perfectly covered lines, as that'll add to the more realistic effect we're going for. And lastly, we're going to do a fine edge highlight of Liberator Gold over the entire Ornstein model. Take your time with this. Pick out any of the sharpest details that you can find, starting from the top, going all the way down, focusing mainly on sharp details that the sun would be hitting, so you don't have to hit sharp details that are like directly underneath the model or directly in shadow areas. Think back to when we did that zenithal highlight of the greedy gold and use the Liberator Gold to pick out the details on top of that. The final step is to base your miniatures in whatever color you want. I'll be using matte black from the Army painter. And there you go, the miniatures are all done. You can see they look really cool, perfect for the board game. The hammer is distinctly different than the armor on this miniature. And for this miniature, you can see he's got a much brighter colored armor so that when they're on the table, they'll look different. Like and subscribe. Hope you like the video.